The strangest thing about losing someone isn't the silence they leave behind. It's realizing they became part of every sound you used to ignore. The richest man in New York couldn't find the one woman who used to clean his house. And somehow, that fact kept me awake at night. My name is Ethan Blackwood. According to every magazine that cared about rankings and net worth, I had everything a man could want. A penthouse overlooking Central Park. A company worth billions. A calendar booked 6 months in advance. People waited weeks for 15 minutes of my time. Yet on that cold October evening, none of it mattered. Rain tapped softly against the windshield of my black Bentley as I sat parked outside a brick apartment building in Queens. The engine was running. The heater hummed quietly. My driver waited without asking questions. Smart man. Most people around me had learned that silence was safer than curiosity. I stared at the third-floor window. Apartment 3B. The place Lily Carter had called home for almost 2 years. The place where every lead had pointed. The place where I was supposed to finally find her. Instead, the lights were off. The curtains were gone. The mailbox downstairs was empty. She had left. Again. I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes for a moment. 8 months earlier, I wouldn't have recognized her name. 8 months earlier, Lily Carter had been one employee among hundreds. A maid. A woman who quietly made beds, folded towels, and disappeared before anyone important noticed she existed. Including me. Funny how life works. Sometimes the person who changes everything enters your world so quietly you don't even hear the door open. My phone vibrated. The screen lit up with another message from my executive assistant. Tomorrow's schedule. Board meetings. Investor calls. A charity gala. Things that used to matter. I dismissed the notification without reading it. Across the street, a coffee shop was closing for the night. A young couple stepped outside laughing beneath a shared umbrella. They looked happy. Not rich. Not powerful. Just happy. For a second, I found myself envying them. That realization would have shocked the version of me from a year ago. The old Ethan Blackwood measured success in acquisitions and quarterly reports. Emotions were inefficiencies. Relationships were distractions. Vulnerability was expensive. Then Lily arrived. Then she looked me directly in the eye one morning and treated me exactly like everyone else. Not like a billionaire. Not like a headline. Just a man. The memory hit harder than I expected. I opened my eyes and looked at the dark apartment window one last time. Somewhere out there, Lily Carter was living a life that no longer included me. And for the first time in years, I had no idea how to fix a problem with money. The rain grew heavier. Tiny rivers of water slid down the glass. Finally, my driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Home, Mr. Blackwood?" he asked quietly. I looked at the empty apartment one final time before answering. "No," I said. My voice sounded strange even to me. Tired. Human. Determined. Keep looking. Because I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. And if I had learned one thing since meeting Lily Carter, it was this. Sometimes the most valuable thing in your life is the one thing money can't buy. 8 months earlier, I was running late. Not because of traffic. Not because of meetings. Because the elevator in the east wing of Blackwood Manor had stopped working again, and apparently nobody could make a decision without me. The morning sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, painting long golden lines across the polished hardwood floor. My assistant stood near my desk reading updates from her tablet while I signed documents that would move millions of dollars before lunch. It was just another Tuesday. Predictable. Controlled. Efficient. Exactly how I liked my life. "The housekeeping agency is sending a replacement this morning," Claire said without looking up. Mrs. Dawson finally retired. I nodded absently. The head housekeeper had worked at the estate longer than most of my executives had worked for the company. Make sure human resources handles it. Already done. Another document landed in front of me. Another signature. Another decision. Outside the office window, gardeners trimmed hedges that had probably cost more than the average family car. Everything looked perfect. It always did. That was the point. Perfection created order. Order created results. Results created success. At least that was what I believed back then. Around noon, I finally left the office to grab coffee from the private kitchen on the second floor. The manor was unusually quiet. Most staff moved like ghosts through the hallways, careful not to disturb the atmosphere of efficiency that surrounded the estate. I preferred it that way. Familiar. Predictable. As I rounded the corner near the library, I noticed someone standing on a ladder dusting the top shelf of a built-in bookcase. A woman, blonde hair pulled into a simple ponytail, faded blue uniform. Nothing remarkable at first glance. She was focused on her work, balancing carefully while reaching toward a row of leather-bound books. I barely noticed her. Why would I? She was staff. I was already checking emails on my phone when it happened. One of the books slipped. It fell from the shelf and landed directly in front of me with a loud thud. I stopped walking. The woman froze. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she climbed down the ladder quickly. "Sorry about that," she said. Her voice was calm. Not nervous. Not panicked. Just honest. I glanced at the book before looking up. Green eyes met mine. Clear. Steady. Most people changed when they realized who I was. Their posture shifted. Their voice changed. Their smile became careful. Calculated. This woman did none of those things. "You should be more careful," I said. "Probably," she replied. "But at least it missed your shoes." I blinked. Nobody talked to me like that. Not rudely. Not disrespectfully. Just normally. Before I could respond, she picked up the book and returned it to the shelf. Then she went right back to work as if the conversation was over. As if I was not Ethan Blackwood. As if I was just another man standing in a hallway. I should have forgotten the encounter immediately. Instead, I found myself looking back over my shoulder as I walked away. And for reasons I could not explain, I remembered her eyes. For the rest of that week, I told myself I had forgotten about her. That was a lie. Not a dramatic lie. Not the kind people tell to others. The quiet kind people tell themselves because the truth is inconvenient. I noticed her everywhere after that. Not because she was trying to be noticed. Quite the opposite. Lily Carter had a talent for disappearing into the background. Every morning the manor looked flawless. Fresh flowers appeared in crystal vases. Books sat perfectly aligned on shelves. Guest rooms remained immaculate even when executives stayed overnight. Most people never thought about who made those things happen. Lily seemed perfectly happy keeping it that way. One Thursday afternoon, I walked into the dining room between meetings and found her standing on a chair adjusting a chandelier crystal that had somehow shifted out of place. Sunlight streamed through the windows, scattering tiny rainbows across the polished table. She was concentrating so intensely that she did not hear me enter. Then the chair wobbled slightly. Instinctively, I stepped forward. Careful. The word left my mouth before I thought about it. She looked down immediately. Not startled, just surprised. "Thanks." She steadied herself and climbed down. Did not want to explain that accident to my supervisor. I glanced toward the chandelier. Most people would not even notice that crystal. I noticed things. She smiled lightly. That is kind of my job. There it was again. That strange ability, she had to speak to me without treating me like I owned half of Manhattan. Most employees became tense around me. They measured every word. Lily never seemed interested in performing. A few days later, I learned something else about her. The annual staff appreciation dinner was held in the Manor's East Ballroom every spring. I usually skipped it. That year I attended for exactly 23 minutes before planning to leave. Long enough to shake hands and make a speech. Then I saw Lily sitting at a table near the back. She was laughing. Not loudly. Just enough to light up her entire face. The people around her looked relaxed. Comfortable. I watched as one of the older kitchen employees accidentally dropped a tray of bread rolls. Several bounced across the floor. Before anyone else moved, Lily was already helping. No complaints. No embarrassment. No attention-seeking. Just kindness. Genuine kindness. The kind that could not be faked. Later that night, I found myself asking Claire a question that surprised even me. The new maid. Lily Carter. How long has she been here? Claire looked up from her tablet. Almost 3 months. 3 months. Somehow it felt longer. Any issues? None. Actually, she is one of the most reliable employees we have. Reliable. The word stayed with me. In my world, reliability was rare. People wanted promotions, contracts, access, favors. Everyone seemed to want something. Yet every time I saw Lily, she appeared perfectly content doing her job and going home. No agenda. No performance. No hidden request waiting around the corner. It should not have interested me. But it did. More than I wanted to admit. Then one rainy evening, as I prepared to leave for a charity event downtown, I walked through the front foyer and overheard part of a conversation. Lily was standing near the entrance, speaking quietly on her phone. Her voice carried just enough for me to hear one sentence. "Do not worry, Ben. I will figure it out." I always do. The warmth in her voice stopped me. The concern. The determination. She sounded like someone carrying more responsibility than a 25-year-old maid should have to carry. Before I could hear anything else, she noticed me standing there. Her expression changed instantly. Not fear. Not nervousness. Just polite professionalism. She slipped her phone into her pocket. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood." I nodded. "Good evening, Lily." It was the first time I had said her name. And for reasons I could not explain, neither of us looked away right away. There are moments in life that seem insignificant when they happen. A conversation in a hallway. A glance across a room. A simple exchange of words. Then months later you realize those moments were turning points. You just did not know it yet. After that evening in the foyer, I started noticing how often Lily was working. Early mornings. Late evenings. Weekends. She seemed to be everywhere. One Saturday afternoon, I returned to the manor earlier than expected after a canceled meeting in Boston. The house was unusually quiet. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, filling the grand staircase with warm golden light. As I walked toward my office, I heard music. Soft, faint, coming from the ballroom. Curious, I followed the sound. The doors were slightly open. Inside, Lily was cleaning the room alone. She had a small speaker sitting on a table nearby. Some old country song played quietly while she worked. She was dusting the piano near the stage, completely unaware that anyone was watching. What caught my attention was not the music. It was the smile on her face. Genuine. Unforced. The kind of smile people wear when nobody is looking. I should have left. Instead, I stood there for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then the floor creaked beneath my shoe. Lily turned immediately. Her smile disappeared, replaced by professional composure. "Sorry," she said, reaching for the speaker. "I can turn that off." "Why?" I asked. She blinked. "Because I am working. The music is not hurting anyone." For a moment, she looked surprised. Then she smiled again, smaller this time. "Most people disagree." I glanced around the massive room. Most people are not responsible for cleaning 50,000 square feet every week. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. The sound lingered in the air longer than it should have. "Fair point, Mr. Blackwood." I looked at the piano beside her. "Do you play?" "A little." She shrugged. "Not well enough to admit it publicly." "I doubt that." Her expression softened. "My mother taught me when I was a kid." There was something different in her voice when she mentioned her mother. A quiet sadness hidden beneath the words. Before I could ask another question, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked the screen quickly. The smile faded. Concern replaced it instantly. "Everything okay?" I asked. The question surprised both of us. Lily hesitated before answering. "My brother. College stuff." Then she quickly added, "Nothing serious." But it sounded serious. The kind of answer people give when they do not want to burden anyone else with their problems. I nodded slowly. Family tends to do that. For a second her eyes met mine. Something passed between us. Recognition maybe. The understanding that responsibility can become heavier than people realize. Then the moment disappeared. She looked away first. I should get back to work. Of course. I turned toward the door. Halfway across the ballroom, I stopped. "Lily." She looked up. "Yes." "Leave the music on." The smile that followed stayed with me for the rest of the day. Later that night, while reviewing financial reports in my office, I caught myself thinking about her again. Not because she was beautiful. Not because she was mysterious. Because she was real. Honest. Grounded. In a world full of people trying to impress me, Lily Carter seemed completely uninterested in doing so. And for the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to seeing someone again tomorrow. The first real change happened at the charity gala in December. At the time, I did not recognize it as a turning point. I thought it was just another event. Another ballroom. Another speech. Another room filled with people discussing investments, partnerships, and numbers with too many zeros attached. The Blackwood Foundation hosted the gala every year. Hundreds of guests attended. Politicians, executives, donors, reporters. The kind of evening that looked glamorous in photographs and felt exhausting in reality. Snow drifted past the tall windows while crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom in warm golden light. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. Or so I thought. I arrived late after a conference call with investors in California. The moment I entered the ballroom, Claire intercepted me. "We have a problem." Those 4 words rarely led to anything good. "What happened?" "The keynote speaker is stuck at the airport in Chicago. Weather delays." I glanced at my watch. Find a replacement. Already trying. Her expression told me the situation was worse than she wanted to admit. Across the room, guests were beginning to notice the delay. Conversations shifted. Schedules unraveled. Small problems have a way of becoming large ones when enough important people are watching. I felt frustration building. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Excuse me." Lily stood near the refreshment table carrying a tray of coffee cups. I could not help overhearing. Claire looked skeptical. I was curious. "Go ahead." Lily hesitated briefly. "The children's choir from St. Matthew's is already here, right?" Claire nodded. "Yes." "Then why not move their performance up? It buys you 20 minutes. Maybe 30. Claire blinked. I blinked. The idea was simple. Obvious, even. Which somehow made it brilliant. Within minutes the plan was in motion. The choir took the stage. Guests loved it. The atmosphere relaxed immediately. By the time the performance ended, the replacement speaker had arrived through a side entrance. Crisis solved. Quietly. Efficiently. Most people never even realized there had been a problem. Later that evening, I found Lily replacing empty glasses near the ballroom entrance. "Your idea worked." She looked up. "That is good. That is all you have to say?" A small smile touched her lips. "You are welcome." I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound surprised both of us. Fair enough. For a moment we stood there watching the snowfall beyond the windows. The city lights shimmered against the dark winter sky. Beautiful. Peaceful. Then Lily noticed an elderly guest struggling with a walker near the far side of the room. Without hesitation, she excused herself and crossed the ballroom to help. No audience. No recognition. No expectation of reward. Just kindness again. Always kindness. I watched her guide the woman toward a table, speaking softly enough that I could not hear the words. The older guest smiled immediately. So did Lily. That was when I finally understood what made her different. It was not her intelligence. Although she was intelligent, it was not her work ethic. Although she worked harder than most people I knew, it was the way she made people feel seen, important, valued. Something money could never manufacture. Something influence could never force. And standing there in a ballroom that cost more than many houses, surrounded by wealth and power, I found myself unable to look away from the one person who possessed neither. January arrived with freezing temperatures and endless gray skies. The manor looked like something from a holiday postcard, covered in fresh snow and surrounded by bare trees that stretched toward the clouds. Most mornings began the same way. Meetings, reports, calls, deadlines. Yet somehow my attention kept drifting elsewhere. One afternoon, Claire entered my office carrying a folder. "The employee scholarship applications are ready for review." I barely looked up from my laptop. Every year Blackwood Holdings offered educational grants to employees and their immediate family members. It was a good program. Useful. Efficient. The kind of initiative shareholders appreciated. Claire placed the folder on my desk. One application stood out. That got my attention. "Why? You should see for yourself." After she left, I opened the folder. Near the top was a familiar name. Benjamin Carter. My eyes narrowed. The applicant was 20 years old. Engineering student. Strong grades. Excellent recommendations. Then I reached the financial section. Tuition debt. Housing expenses. Part-time employment. The numbers told a story that felt painfully familiar. Someone working twice as hard just to stay in the race. Someone carrying responsibilities that should have been easier. I continued reading. Emergency contact, Lily Carter. Sister. Suddenly the conversation I had overheard months earlier made sense. "Do not worry, Ben. I will figure it out. I always do." She had not been talking about a minor inconvenience. She had been carrying someone else's future on her shoulders. I closed the folder and stared out the window. Snow drifted slowly across the estate grounds. Most people assumed wealth solved every problem. What they never understood was how many problems existed before money ever entered the equation. The next morning I approved the scholarship personally. Full tuition assistance, housing support, academic resources, everything the program allowed. Then I instructed human resources to process it anonymously. No special recognition, no explanation, no connection to me. A week later, I happened to cross paths with Lily near the west entrance. She was carrying fresh linens and looked unusually distracted. Then I noticed something different. She was smiling. Not the polite smile she gave everyone. A real one. Bright. Relieved. Like someone had finally been allowed to exhale. "Good morning." I said. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood." There was a lightness in her voice I had not heard before. "You seem happy." She hesitated. "My brother received some good news." I nodded carefully. "That is always worth celebrating." Her smile widened. "It really is." For a moment, neither of us moved. Winter sunlight reflected off the snow outside, filling the hallway with soft white light. Then Lily surprised me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When did you know what you wanted to do with your life?" The question caught me off guard. Nobody asked me things like that anymore. They asked about business, investments, success, never purpose. I thought about it for a second. Honestly, I did not. I just kept moving forward until one day I realized I had built a life. Lily considered that answer quietly. "That sounds lonely." The words landed harder than they should have, because she was not wrong. And judging by the look in her eyes, she knew it. Before I could respond, someone called her name from down the hallway. Lily turned toward the voice, then looked back at me. "Thank you for answering." She walked away a moment later, disappearing around the corner. I stood there much longer than necessary, because for the first time in years, someone had looked past the billionaire everyone saw and noticed the man underneath. February arrived quietly. The snow began to melt. The days stretched a little longer. Yet something inside me felt increasingly unsettled. It took weeks before I understood why. I had started looking for Lily. Not intentionally at first, just small things. Wondering if she was working in the East Wing when I walked through it. Noticing when her car was missing from the employee parking lot. Listening for her laugh during staff events. The realization should have concerned me. Instead, it became impossible to ignore. One evening, I left the office well after dark. The manor was nearly empty. Most employees had gone home hours earlier. As I crossed the main foyer, I noticed a light still glowing in one of the smaller sitting rooms near the library. Curious, I stepped closer. Lily sat alone at a table surrounded by notebooks and papers. A half-finished cup of coffee rested beside her. She looked exhausted. Her shoulders sagged slightly as she stared at a calculator. For a moment, she did not notice me. Then she looked up. Surprise flashed across her face. "Mr. Blackwood." I glanced at the clock. "Nearly 10 o'clock. You are still here." She laughed softly. "Apparently." I looked at the stack of paperwork. "Everything okay?" For the first time since I had known her, she seemed unsure how to answer. Mostly. The word carried more weight than she realized. I pulled out a chair across from her. "That does not sound convincing." Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. For a few seconds, she simply stared at the papers. Then she exhaled slowly. "My brother's scholarship covered tuition." I nodded. "That is good news." "It is." A small smile appeared before fading again. "But there are still living expenses. Books, housing, everything else." She glanced down. I picked up extra shifts. Suddenly everything made sense. The long hours, the constant exhaustion, the late nights. She was carrying an entire family's future on her shoulders. Again, alone. "Does your brother know?" I asked. "Some of it." Her expression softened. "Ben works hard. He already feels guilty enough." Silence settled between us. Outside the windows, rain tapped gently against the glass. Somewhere in the distance, a grandfather clock chimed 10 times. "You know," I said carefully, "most people would ask for help." Lily smiled sadly. "Maybe. And you?" She looked directly at me. "I have spent most of my life learning how to stand on my own." There was no bitterness in her voice. No self-pity. Just simple truth. Somehow that made it even more powerful. I found myself admiring her more than ever. Not because she was struggling. Because she refused to let hardship define her. Because she kept moving forward anyway. Eventually, she gathered the papers and slipped them into a folder. "I should go home." I stood as well. "It is late." She nodded. We walked toward the entrance together. The rain had become heavier. Streetlights reflected across the wet driveway outside. At the door, Lily paused. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." Her smile returned, small but genuine. "You are not what I expected." The words caught me completely off guard. Before I could ask what she meant, she pushed open the door and stepped into the rainy night. I stood there watching her walk toward the parking lot. And for the first time, I realized I wanted to know exactly what she saw when she looked at me. The strange thing about falling for someone is that it rarely feels dramatic at first. There is no lightning strike, no orchestra, no sudden certainty. It happens quietly, one conversation at a time, one smile at a time, one ordinary moment that somehow becomes unforgettable. March arrived with warmer weather and longer afternoons. The snow finally disappeared from the estate grounds, replaced by fresh green grass and flowering trees. Life should have felt normal again. Instead, everything felt different. Mostly because Lily felt different. Or maybe I did. One Friday evening, I was reviewing contracts in my office when Claire knocked lightly on the door. "You have a visitor." I frowned. "At 7 o'clock?" He insisted. A few moments later, a young man stepped inside. Tall, thin, nervous, early 20s. He looked familiar. Then I recognized the green eyes. "Benjamin Carter," he said, extending his hand. "Lily's brother." I shook it. "What can I do for you?" He smiled awkwardly. "Actually, I came to say thank you." My stomach tightened immediately. "For what?" "The scholarship." "So much for anonymous." Benjamin laughed softly. "Do not worry. Human resources did not tell me. Lily figured it out." That surprised me. "How?" "Because she notices everything." I could not help smiling. That sounded exactly right. Benjamin glanced around the office. "She talks about you sometimes." The words caught me off guard. "Really? Not in the way you were thinking." He laughed again. "She just says you work too much." I leaned back in my chair. That sounds like her too. For the next 20 minutes we talked. About engineering. About college. About his future. About Lily. By the time he left, I understood something important. Everything Lily had done for her brother came at a personal cost. Extra shifts. Missed opportunities. Endless sacrifices she never discussed. Yet she never complained. Not once. The following Monday, I found her in the greenhouse near the south garden arranging flowers for an upcoming event. Warm sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling above us. The air smelled faintly of roses and fresh soil. She looked peaceful there. Almost happy. "Your brother visited me." Lily froze. Then she closed her eyes dramatically. "Please tell me he did not embarrass me." "Only a little." She laughed. The sound echoed softly through the greenhouse. "That sounds about right." I stepped closer. "He is impressive." Pride lit her face immediately. "He really is." I noticed the change instantly. The way her entire expression softened when she talked about him. The way hope replaced exhaustion. "You did that," I said quietly. She looked confused. "Did what?" "Helped him get there." Lily shook her head. "No. Ben did that himself." There it was again. That refusal to take credit. That instinct to put everyone else first. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Sunlight danced across the glass walls around us. Somewhere outside, birds sang from the nearby trees. Then Lily looked at me carefully. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy?" I opened my mouth, then stopped, because I did not have an answer. And judging by the expression on her face, she already knew that. The question stayed with me long after I left the greenhouse. When was the last time I did something simply because it made me happy? Not because it increased revenue. Not because it strengthened a partnership. Not because it improved a quarterly report. Just because I wanted to. The answer bothered me because I could not find one. Over the following weeks, I started noticing small changes in my routine. I left the office earlier. Not every day, but often enough for Claire to raise an eyebrow. I canceled a few unnecessary dinners. I spent less time staring at spreadsheets and more time walking the estate grounds in the evening. For the first time in years, I began paying attention to things that had nothing to do with business. And somehow, Lily was always connected to those moments. One Saturday afternoon in April, I found her sitting on a bench near the lake at the edge of the property. She was not working. That alone felt unusual. A paperback novel rested in her lap, while a gentle breeze stirred the water nearby. The trees had begun to bloom, filling the air with the scent of spring. I almost turned around. Then she looked up and spotted me. "Caught me being lazy," she said with a grin. "Reading is not lazy. That depends on who you ask." I sat on the opposite end of the bench. The lake shimmered beneath the afternoon sunlight. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Surprisingly, the silence felt comfortable. "You look different lately," Lily said. I glanced toward her. "Different how?" She considered the question carefully. "Lighter." I laughed softly. "That is a strange compliment." "It is still a compliment." Her smile widened. "You smile more now." The observation caught me off guard because it was true. Somewhere along the way, the constant pressure I carried had begun to loosen. Not disappear, just loosen. "Maybe I finally started taking your advice." "Which advice?" "Finding things that make me happy." Lily looked genuinely pleased. "And did you?" I looked out across the water. A family of ducks drifted near the far shore. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. The world felt unusually peaceful. I think I am still figuring that out. Her expression softened. That is allowed, you know. What is? Not having everything figured out. I shook my head. People expect me to. Maybe that is the problem. The words settled between us. Simple. Honest. Impossible to dismiss. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and immediately smiled. Ben. I guessed. Ben, she confirmed. The warmth in her voice made me smile too. She answered the call and spent several minutes listening while her brother excitedly described a project he was working on. I pretended not to listen, but it was impossible not to notice how happy she sounded. When the call ended, she looked almost radiant. Good news? I asked. Very good news. She tucked the phone away. He got selected for a summer internship. Pride filled every word. Looking at her in that moment, I finally understood something I had been avoiding for months. My favorite part of every day had become the moments I spent with her, and that realization should have frightened me far more than it did. The problem with happiness is that once you find it, you start fearing the day it disappears. I did not understand that until May. The first sign came from a business magazine, then a financial blog, then a gossip website that specialized in turning ordinary events into headlines. At first, I ignored it. People had been writing stories about me for years. Most of them were wrong. This time was different. The rumors started small. Anonymous sources. Speculation. Photographs taken from impossible angles. A billionaire seen spending unusual amounts of time at his own estate. A mysterious woman frequently spotted nearby. None of it made sense. None of it should have mattered. Yet somehow the stories kept spreading. One morning, I walked into the executive conference room and found 3 board members discussing the latest article before the meeting even started. They stopped talking the moment I entered. That told me everything I needed to know. By the end of the week, reporters had begun calling the manor. Employees noticed. Staff whispered. Curiosity spread through the estate like a slow-moving storm. Then one Friday afternoon, I found Lily standing alone in the greenhouse. The same greenhouse where she had once asked me when I had last done something that made me happy. This time she looked different. Quiet. Distant. The sunlight still filtered through the glass ceiling. Flowers still bloomed around us, but the warmth that usually surrounded her seemed gone. Lily. She turned. A smile appeared, but it did not reach her eyes. Mr. Blackwood. My chest tightened immediately. What happened? She looked away. Nothing. That is not true. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she folded her arms. Someone left a magazine in the staff lounge. I already knew where this was going. Lily. They printed my picture. Her voice remained calm. Too calm. They guessed who I was. The guilt hit harder than I expected. Because she had never asked for attention. Never wanted recognition. All she had ever wanted was to do her job and go home to the life she was building. I am sorry. She looked surprised. Why are you apologizing? Because this is happening because of me. For a moment she said nothing. Then she shook her head. No. This is happening because people enjoy creating stories. I wanted to believe that. But deep down I knew the truth. My world was complicated. Public. Loud. Lily's world was private. Simple. Honest. The collision between those two realities was never going to be easy. A few days later, things became worse. Another article appeared online. This one was crueler. More personal. It suggested that Lily had used her position to gain advantages. That she had somehow manipulated circumstances for personal benefit. The accusations were ridiculous. Anyone who knew her would have laughed at them. Unfortunately, millions of readers did not know her. That evening I searched the entire manor looking for her. The library, the ballroom, the gardens. Nothing. Finally, I found Claire near the front entrance. One look at her face told me something was wrong. Where is Lily? Claire hesitated. Then she handed me an envelope. My name was written across the front in familiar handwriting. Suddenly the world felt very still. She left this an hour ago, Claire said quietly. Then she packed her things and resigned. For several seconds I could not move, could not think, could not breathe properly. I stared at the envelope in my hands as a terrible realization settled over me. The person who had slowly become the best part of my life was gone, and I had absolutely no idea how to stop her. For a long time, I just stood there holding the envelope. The manor around me continued moving as if nothing had changed. Employees walked through hallways. Phones rang. Doors opened and closed. Somewhere in the distance, a vacuum cleaner hummed. Normal life continued. Mine did not. Eventually, I opened the letter. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. Not because of the words. Because of who had written them. Ethan, thank you for everything. Thank you for believing in people when they needed it most. Thank you for helping my brother. Thank you for showing me kindness. But I cannot stay. The attention is becoming too much. Every conversation feels different now. Every room feels different. People are looking at me instead of seeing me. And if I stay, things will only become harder for both of us. You once told me that success creates responsibility. I think happiness does too. Please do not come looking for me. Take care of yourself. Lily. That was it. No anger. No accusations. No dramatic goodbye. Somehow that made it worse. She had not left because she stopped caring. She had left because she cared too much. The following weeks became a blur. Meetings happened. Contracts were signed. Interviews were conducted. I attended events and gave speeches. To everyone else, Ethan Blackwood appeared exactly the same. Inside, everything felt wrong. The manor felt wrong too. Every room carried memories. The greenhouse where she challenged my assumptions. The ballroom where she solved a problem nobody else could solve. The lake where she asked questions nobody else dared ask. Even the library felt different. Quieter somehow. One evening, nearly a month after she left, I found myself standing in the hallway where we first met. The same bookshelf. The same polished floor. The same afternoon sunlight stretching across the wall. I stared at the spot where a book had fallen from a shelf months earlier. Strange how a single moment could change an entire life. You miss her. Claire's voice came from behind me. I turned. She stood a few feet away holding a tablet. For once, she looked more like a friend than an assistant. Is it that obvious? I asked. Only to everyone. I laughed softly. The sound carried no humor. Claire studied me for a moment. You know, I have worked for you for 9 years. I nodded. And I have never seen you leave the office before 6 o'clock until she came along. The observation hit harder than expected because it was true. Lily had changed things without trying. Changed me without asking. Claire handed me a folder. Your schedule for tomorrow. I accepted it automatically. Then she paused before walking away. For what it is worth, I think she would hate seeing you this miserable. After she left, I remained there alone, looking at the bookshelf, looking at the place where everything started. Finally, I understood something I should have realized months ago. The problem was not that Lily had left. The problem was that I had never told her how much she mattered before she did. And for the first time in my life, I found myself facing a problem that could not be solved with money, influence, or patience. Because the one person I wanted to talk to was the only person I could not find. 3 weeks later, I was still looking. Not publicly. Not through private investigators. Not through headlines or connections. If Lily had taught me anything, it was that some people deserve to be found the right way. Quietly. Respectfully. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. Mr. Blackwood? The voice sounded familiar. Benjamin. Yeah. He hesitated. Do you have a minute? 20 minutes later, I was sitting inside a small coffee shop in Brooklyn. The kind of place I never would have noticed before meeting Lily. Warm lighting. Worn wooden tables. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon. Benjamin sat across from me looking nervous. She is going to be upset with me for this. My heart immediately started racing. You know where she is. He sighed. Sort of. For the first time in weeks, hope returned. Benjamin. He held up a hand. Before I tell you anything, you need to understand something. I leaned forward. I am listening. He looked out the rain-streaked window for a moment before speaking. Lily did not leave because of the articles. Confusion settled over me. What do you mean? They hurt. Sure. But that was not the real reason. I stared at him. Then what was? Benjamin smiled sadly. You. The answer hit me harder than expected. Me? She fell in love with you. The words seemed to echo inside my chest. For a moment, the entire coffee shop disappeared. The conversations. The music. The rain outside. Everything faded. What? I managed quietly. Benjamin laughed softly. Trust me. I know my sister. He looked down at his coffee cup. The problem was that she thought staying would eventually hurt your life. I shook my head. That makes no sense. It does if you know Lily. He smiled again. She spent her whole life putting other people first. She saw the headlines getting worse. She saw people talking. She convinced herself that leaving would protect you from more problems. I sat there in stunned silence. All this time I had believed she left because she wanted distance, because she regretted getting close to me. The truth was somehow worse and better at the same time. She had left because she cared. Where is she? I asked. Benjamin studied me carefully. There is a community center in Connecticut, small town called Maple Grove. She has been helping with educational programs there. I stood immediately. Benjamin laughed. I figured that would be your reaction. Then his expression became serious. Just one thing. Anything. If you go, do not go as Ethan Blackwood the billionaire. I frowned. Then who do I go as? Benjamin smiled knowingly. The man she actually fell for. An hour later, I was driving north through steady rain. No driver. No assistant. No schedule. Just me. The highway stretched ahead beneath dark clouds while windshield wipers moved rhythmically across the glass. For the first time in months, I knew exactly where I was going. And for the first time in my life, reaching a destination felt more important than any deal I had ever closed. Maple Grove was smaller than I expected. One main street, a handful of local businesses, tree-lined sidewalks, the kind of town people moved to when they wanted life to slow down. By the time I arrived, the rain had stopped. Late afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds, painting everything in soft gold. I parked outside the community center and sat there for a moment. My heart was beating harder than it had before any board meeting, investor presentation, or acquisition. Because this time, there was something I could actually lose. Through the front windows, I saw children gathered around tables covered with books and art supplies. Volunteers moved between them, helping with projects and homework. Then I saw her. Lily stood near the center of the room, laughing at something a little girl had said. The sound did not reach me through the glass, but I did not need to hear it. Some things never change. She looked happy, truly happy. For a second I considered turning around, letting her keep that happiness without disrupting it. Then she looked up. Our eyes met through the window. Everything stopped. The children, the noise, the distance. None of it mattered. Lily froze. So did I. A moment later, she stepped outside. The door closed softly behind her. Neither of us spoke right away. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and spring flowers through the air. Finally, she shook her head slightly. You found me. I smiled. You know, your brother was not nearly as difficult to convince as he thought he was. Lily laughed despite herself. The sound felt like coming home. Then her expression softened. Ethan, just hearing my name from her felt different after all this time. Why are you here? I took a breath. Because you were wrong. Confusion crossed her face. About what? About leaving. She looked away immediately. Ethan. No. I stepped closer. You do not get to make decisions for me and call it a sacrifice. Her eyes widened slightly. I was trying to help. I know. My voice softened. That is the problem. You always try to help everyone else. Silence settled between us. I could see emotions moving behind her eyes. Hope, fear, uncertainty. The same things I had been carrying for months. Those articles were not the reason I wanted you in my life. She looked at me carefully. Then why did you? I laughed quietly. Because you challenged me. Another step closer. Because you made me smile. Closer still. Because you taught me that success means nothing if there is nobody worth sharing it with. Her eyes shimmered slightly in the afternoon light. Ethan. And because somewhere between a falling book, a greenhouse conversation, and 1,000 ordinary moments, I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between us. Honest. Simple. True. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Lily smiled. The same smile that had changed everything months ago. You took long enough. I laughed. She laughed. And suddenly the distance between us disappeared. We stood there talking until sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. About the future. About fear. About possibilities. Nothing dramatic. Nothing perfect. Just real. Later that evening, as we walked down the quiet streets of Maple Grove together, I realized something important. I had spent years building an empire, but the best thing I ever found was never something I bought. It was someone who reminded me how to live. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt exactly where I wanted to be.